As a college freshman, I thought my rational mind was orchestrating the show. But in reality, emotions were running every millisecond of my life. Every single morning, I'd wake up at 6 a.m. and do 3 mile run around BB Lake, 5K if you're sensible. And then I'd get a coffee from Rusty's, which was always black, of course. Then I'd submerge myself into a deep work focus lake for 4 to 5 hours typing YouTube scripts and doing schoolwork. If my friends wanted to get lunch, then it had to be in this specific 30-minute window, which was allowed for by the anabolic diet that I was on, or I just wouldn't get lunch with them. And after lunch, I begrudgingly donned my student persona and backpack and went to classes. Finally, at 6 p.m., I would get dinner, read a book until bed, and then I'd rinse and repeat the whole thing. I thought I was a pretty emotionally stable guy. And then I realized that not feeling emotions is not the same as not having emotions. You see, my carefully crafted routine was actually quarantining me from spontaneity and change. I was hiding myself from doubts like, am I in the right career? Should I be on this diet? Am I in the right friend group? Should I be thinking about exercise and eating 26 hours in a day? I buried the restlessness, the anxiety, and the self-doubt inside books and caffeine. And slowly, the repercussions hit me. I lost my first friend group. I felt so drained from exercising and eating like a rabbit that I could barely do any work. And I cried myself to sleep some nights because of how lonely I was. So I knew things needed to change. And I went on our begrudging Lord and Savior, the Amazon Kindle store, to find books on emotional regulation and intelligence. And it's there that I kickstarted a 4-year rabbit hole where I've created over 700 YouTube videos, blog posts, and podcasts partially on this topic of emotional intelligence. I've taught hundreds of college students and adults about emotional intelligence and other things through 6 self-made courses. And I've read over 500 books, a lot of which are on the scientific and spiritual side of this topic, including Emotional Intelligence 2.0, The Righteous Mind, and Thinking Fast and Slow. I've also written 1,500 journal entries and created an entire free cosmic journaling kit to help build emotional intelligence for college freshmen. So I've learned throughout this process something crucial, which is our emotional intelligence comes in large part through integrating mind and emotions together. And this is particularly important now as Gen Z has been sucked into a rabbit hole of shorts and the internet, video games, and AI slop. As Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book, The Anxious Generation, we are the most anxious generation ever. And a lot of it comes from emotions running our college life without us even realizing it. So throughout this video, I want to explore what emotions even are, what emotional intelligence is, and how to integrate mind and emotions together to build it. So firstly, what are emotions and what is emotional intelligence? It seems pretty simple. You think, Aiden, emotions, those are those things that are like, yeah, it's pretty hard to define. Science has some great partial answers. In gross generalization, neuroscientists understand emotions as evolved mechanisms primarily controlled by the limbic system to help us physically survive and interact with others. Cognitive scientists see emotions as useful in making intuitive associative judgments, as well as longer-term, more rational ones. And psychologists say emotions are partially the unconscious's way of speaking to the conscious mind. So These are all great partial answers. But overall, like consciousness, science generally doesn't have a good answer for what emotions actually are. And I believe the most holistic, wise, insightful understanding of emotions comes from integrating the scientific with the scientific spiritual. Some scientists, particularly the transpersonal psychologists, have begun looking at the deep structures of spiritual traditions across history, and they found something profound. Spiritual traditions have had the answer to what emotions are for thousands of years. And it's this spiritual understanding of emotions that is the most profound and life altering for the topic today. So, drum roll, please. Emotions are biases in how we relate to consciousness. Here's some examples what I mean. Boredom is finding the current experience inadequately stimulating or growing, often compelling us to look for more stimulating or growing experiences. Anxiety is fear of a potential future, often compelling us to act now so it doesn't happen. Sadness is the pain of missing out on a potential experience you would have loved, often compelling us to seek that experience or just feel apathetic or grieved. Creativity makes us want to express what we experience internally, externally in some form, whether it be writing, YouTube videos, or poetry. And fun is finding the current experience growing or stimulating in a non-serious way, non-threatening, often compelling us to do the thing more. Now, of course, the same emotion can show up differently in different contexts. So you can have jumbles of emotions as well, like sadness, anger, creativity, fun, calm, boredom. And these emotion soups often mix with our sensations, our perceptions, and our thoughts to create the mystery that is consciousness. In essence, all emotions compel us to relate to consciousness in a certain way. Often, even when we don't want to. I mean, you know the feeling. You feel a way about something and you don't have much control over it. Even when you try and use your mind to think otherwise, the feeling is still there. The bias in consciousness is still there. Now, there's strategies we'll talk about for how to navigate this later, but this leads us to the next question, which is, why does this happen? Why can't we rationalize these emotions away? And this is where I want to introduce self-witnessing. So do something for me, will you, while you're watching this video. Close your eyes, as long as you're not driving. Don't close your eyes if you're driving or doing something that you can't. You can also do this with eyes open. And ground in the witness. The witness is the awareness which is watching all of present experience. Imagine your life was a movie that involves all the senses: physical, smell, taste, touch, sight, sound. And you are so immersed in this movie, you can't even see that you're actually watching it in a movie theater, just like when you've gotten immersed in a movie theater. So ground in that being that watches the movie theater. And if you do this, you'll notice there's a lot going on in consciousness without your control, right? You're experiencing sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and emotions, but you're not the one bringing this up. Even when you do consciously bring something up, like a thought, there is a awareness that is aware of you bringing that up. This is the witness, and it doesn't do the thinking or the feeling, it just watches it. The more you ground in the witness, the more you realize there is a lot of chatter in your mind. Let's go party. No, we should study. I'm hungry. Why don't we go to bed so we can get up for class? This is perfectly normal. And it begins to explain what emotions really are, which brings us to the next insight. Richard Schwartz explores in his wonderful book, No Bad Parts, that we are made up of many parts, which use emotions, among other things, to help us in their own ways. So some parts are more rational, long-thinking oriented. Like, for example, I have a part of myself, Aurelius, named after Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, who really cares about virtue and long-term thinking rooted in values. Often he makes me feel excited and curious for how I can help other people self-actualize. Another part of me, however, Mr. Career, is much more career-oriented in a profitable, practical sense. And he makes me feel anxiety and restlessness so that I can actually pay for rent at the end of the month. Now, other ports can be more short-term oriented, like Groovy, who is the part of me that loves fun, adventure, short-term, pleasurable things. And as you might guess, these three parts mix about as well as a poetry major at a frat party. So a lot of emotional difficulty comes from these parts conflicting with each other in 1,000 different directions, fighting each other like it's a gosh darn, coliseum in your mind. And so the question then becomes, where do these parts come from? What are they trying to do? And how do they use emotions to do that? And this is where we get at the most profound part of this entire video. What emotions are truly for, which is the survival of your false self. Alongside everything that spiritual traditions say earlier, emotions, they understand, are helping us survive our false self. The false self is the finite character that you create throughout college to help you navigate. Said another way, the false self is a conglomeration of all of our parts. It's made through the process of human development. We all ascribe, as we grow up, things to ourself and things to other. For most students in college, the false self is made of our body, our achievements, our interests, and our relationships, whereas everything else is other. And in the beginnings of human history, this self-othering was mostly done for physical survival. Without a separation from our environment, we couldn't hunt, eat, sleep, because imagine trying to pick berries from a bush if you thought you were the bush. Sort of bizarre to think about it like that way. But nowadays, if you're in a college setting, it's unlikely that you deal much with physical survival, and so therefore you survive more in a psychological sense, right? It's unlikely you're going to get mauled by a tiger while walking to class. Jaywalking is the most dangerous thing that we do, especially if you live in Ithaca, New York. I swear some of the drivers here are like, they have a vendetta against you. So instead, our false selves survive psychologically. We create a self out of our beliefs, our achievements, and our major and our interests and our relationships so that we can navigate college. And then we survive these parts through doing actions, following the values, following the emotions and thoughts that it feels. And it's for this reason that we have to look at our false self with a lot of compassion. It's surviving itself, sometimes in ways that harm us, but mostly it's trying to help us find success, happiness, and love. And it's the false self which got us into this college setting in the first place. But so it's not that you should come to it with disdain, like, how could you do this? It's something to look at sort of like a friend, helping you try and work towards all the things you want to. But of course, the false self doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to change, because that would literally feel like dying. I mean, in some ways, it's the same, because your false self changing to have a different value or a different relationship is literally like you being a different person. So the false self is something to come to with compassion. The problem is when our false self tries to help us in ways that no longer are working for us in the season of life that we're in. And this is the radical way that we bring emotions back into the picture. Emotions, alongside the scientific reasons talked about earlier, help us survive our false self. They're used by parts of our false self, like for me, Aurelius, Mr. Career, or Groovy, sometimes in ways that help us navigate college, and sometimes in ways that actually hurt us. So let me give you some examples. You receive a B on a paper and you feel a sense of embarrassment and shame. This emotion could be a part of you trying to help you work harder so that you can get better grades because your false self values achievement or good grades to actualize your purpose. If you feel a sense of excitement and enjoyment when you have a deep conversation with a friend, this is a more positively oriented thing. And this could be your false self trying to help you form deep connections with friends so that you aren't lonely at college. Or you feel a sense of restlessness and anxiety when you see a fellow student studying in the library because your false self is trying to help you not fall behind the other students, which are all really hardworking. So, in all three cases, singular parts of ourselves use emotion in order to make us navigate and survive our false selves. And the mistake many students make is thinking that the event, the external thing, caused the emotion. But this is not the case. And this is where the next last insight before we talk about emotional intelligence comes in, which is external events don't cause emotions. It's our interpretation of those events, both consciously and unconsciously, that creates our interpretations, that creates how we react to them. Interpretations which come from our false self and all the parts which make it up. Nowhere is it written in the universe that getting a B is inherently bad. It's our attachment to achievement and finding a good career that makes us feel embarrassment and shame. In having a conversation with a friend, nowhere in the universe does it say that having a deep conversation is better than having a conversation of small talk. It's us that is projecting that value onto the thing. Said another way, our external challenges found our internal ones. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't navigate external challenges, of course. It just means that we navigate them with internal rootedness. So it's with this understanding that we can finally answer the question, why is it so hard to navigate and integrate mind and emotion? And the fundamental reason is because mind and emotion are not separate, but both affected by the parts of our false self. Jonathan Haidt shows in his book, The Righteous Mind, that often people, when they hear a value statement, they form an intuitive emotional opinion as soon as they hear it, and then they validate it after the fact with their rationalizing mind. And this is why attempting to run from my emotions in the beginning of the story didn't work, because I used my mind to force myself into deep work and rigid anabolic dieting. And I thought I was escaping my irrational emotions. But in reality, my very rationalization was a result of me unconsciously trying to avoid the inner doubt, the restlessness, and the anxiety that I was feeling. So clearly, the answer is not in prioritizing mind or prioritizing emotions. It's in integrating these two together, integrating our parts of our false self so that they help us rather than are constantly clashing. And that's where we can finally answer what emotional intelligence really is, which is the integration of mind and heart, all of our parts, in navigating our false self so that we can pursue our true self. Our true self is our deepest nature, where we attain true success, happiness, and love. The true self does not reject the false self, rather, it lovingly integrates it and transcends it. And rooted in our true self, we often feel courageous, calm, compassionate, creative. And yet, the journey there is full of hardship, challenges, and pain. And the funny thing is, we already are our true selves. It's just that we have to awaken to it when we integrate and transcend our false self to reunite with the fundamental oneness of reality, with spirit, with our true deepest nature. And this is the insight that spiritual traditions have been trying to give for thousands of years. and what we're finally coming to through integrating science and scientific spirituality together. So that's quite profound. Now, how do we actually do it is the question. So with an understanding of emotional intelligence, we can move on to the most practical part of this video, which is how we build it. And generally, there's two different ways, which is first building our emotional awareness and then our emotional navigation. So emotional awareness is the foundation of emotional intelligence because it's the moment you stop being inside your emotions and start standing with them, which is primarily through the building the depth of your self-witnessing. Ground in the awareness behind all experience. And then when you do this, you can stop feeling like emotions are commands and start feeling like they're information, right? Anxiety becomes something you're experiencing rather than something that you are. Sadness becomes weather passing through you rather than the climate of your reality. And as you witness more and more, you'll build your emotional vocabulary. Instead of someone asking you how you're doing and you saying, oh, good, bad, okay, you can start saying like, sad for this way, angry because of this, bored because of that. And that gives you more control over your emotional life because you have more language through which to talk about it. Now, alongside self-witnessing, journaling is another super powerful awareness builder because at first you journal about your day, but then in this video, I hope it's becoming clear that journaling about your day is just the first step. What we want to get to is reflective journaling, which is journaling how it is that you're feeling and why you're feeling that way, especially in the pursuit of figuring out what parts are inside of each context of your life, what they're trying to help you do, and how you can integrate them together so that they're not conflicting with each other all the time. Through this consistent emotional awareness, you'll begin to see your false self operating with compassion instead of judgment. You notice how your emotions are trying to help you, even when they truly hurt. And then from this understanding, you can move towards emotional navigation. So self-awareness helps you, emotional awareness helps you see the emotions, and emotional navigation helps you navigate them. And the key move is the pause. You see the emotion, and then you can do three different things, which are, firstly, we'll talk about two, which are internally minded emotional navigation. And that's resoiling and reseeding. So resoiling is the art of letting an emotion metabolize into something else. So for example, you see anxiety come up, you accept it non-judgmentally, you just watch it as a self-witness, and then you ask if it's okay to change it into something else. For example, anxiety is quite similar to excitement. So you can change that anxiety into excitement to help you navigate whatever it's anxious about. For example, a student panicking before an exam can change that anxiety about studying into excitement to study and do well. Now, the important thing is you don't change the emotion if it doesn't want to be changed. You still accept the resistance of change if there is resistance to it being changed. So that's resoiling. Then you have reseeding, which involves changing your self-concept so the emotion no longer has the same grip. So if your false self says, I am a high achiever, then a B feels like a threat. But if your identity shifts to, I'm someone who learns deeply over time, a B no longer feels as intimidating because you realize that the grade is not necessarily indicative of the actual learning. So reseeding doesn't erase the emotion, it just changes the soil that they grow in. And that means it no longer dominates consciousness. Now, some emotions are asking for movement in the world, right? We're not rejecting external change. And this is where relocating comes in, which is changing something tangible to support your inner life. So for example, leaving the library when restlessness peaks, if you see all these other students studying, or saying no to another club commitment so that you can hang out with some friends, or eating alone instead of with friends when you want to build your ability to just be on your own. So this is external change rooted in internal awareness. And This three-step process, emotional awareness, not emotional awareness, but resoiling, reseeding, and relocating, is the tri-force of emotional navigation. Quite profound, right? So, at the heart of our whole time together, this is what I want you to take away. We are never as rational as we think we are. In college, especially, emotions are shaping our decisions, our relationships, our beliefs, and our identities way before our reasoning steps in to explain them. And ignoring emotions doesn't make us free, it just makes us blind to the forces that are already controlling our lives. Emotions are not mistakes or flaws to be eliminated, they're biases in how we relate to consciousness. They're taken up by the parts of our false self to help us navigate college. And they are then make us interpret external events in certain ways, which we need to understand how they're doing so through internal rootedness. Building emotional intelligence is not about suppressing our emotions, it's about integrating mind and heart, our different parts together through self awareness and emotional navigation, learning when to sit with emotions, when to reframe our identities, and when to change something concrete in the world. And that, by coming to our emotions through love and kindness and compassion, that is how we get deeper and deeper into our true self. Not a one-time breakthrough, but rather a lifelong spiral, a continual journey that you do throughout college, what I call the conscious college journey, in order to deeper and deeper integrate mind and emotions together until eventually you can realize the oneness that you have with all of reality, the fundamental interconnectedness between you and every other student and me creating this video talking to you right now, so that you can attain true success, happiness, and love. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you resonated with this, I highly recommend you check out my free college freshman cosmic journaling kit, which is a gamified journaling system that helps build your emotional intelligence, your self-understanding, and your purpose with over 1,000 journaling questions in just 15 minutes a day. You can find that in the description below. As always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Eat some peanut butter, and bye-bye.